Hello, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of Sunday Messages. And we are kicking off the month of February with an entire month of sex, love, dating, relationships, all the juicy relationship stuff that you want to know. And I chose dating and connection as the topic for today's podcast. And just a heads up, for those of you who are curious about soulmates and twin flames, I have an entire podcast that's dedicated to that I did back in July, I think. So if you want that, then go listen to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, because I'm not going to be talking about that specifically this month. I might touch on it here and there, but if you want a full dedicated podcast, go listen to that old episode that I did, and that will satisfy all of your twin flame soulmate relationship questions. If you want to submit a question this month, make sure you follow me on Instagram, because that's where I put all of the question boxes for you guys to ask in, and then I will answer it on the podcast. So just in case you're listening to this and you don't follow me already, go check me out on Instagram at Onyx Healing. So anyway, enough chitter chatter. Let's go ahead and dive into dating and chemistry and connection. So let me give you my 2 cents on dating and that whole thing. I think there are a lot of people who either have mixed feelings about dating, then you have people who fall into a bit more extreme feelings about dating. Some people love it, some people hate it, and whatever the case may be, I think that dating is necessary for many people. Now, of course, we all know the people who married their high school sweetheart or their college sweetheart, and that's all fine and good, but this is for more of you who are actually in the exploration stage of your love life. So if there is one thing that I consider myself to be extremely experienced at, it is dating. I have dated more than I possibly care to admit. At one point, I was going on like 5 dates a week with different people. And these were just first dates. This is just trying and tasting and dabbling, just getting to know people, even if there wasn't ultimately any chemistry there, or if I didn't want to move forward with the relationship or anything like that. I got in a lot of dating pretty early on in adulthood. Now, there are a lot of people I know, because I hear it all the time, who really don't want to date or don't enjoy dating, or think that the fact that they have to get to know different people or might need to explore is somehow a bad thing. I know many people who just want it to be absolutely easy. And here are my thoughts on that, okay? Now, there are people who have really explosive, exciting social lives and who are already in a big web and network with a lot of people, where meeting new people all of the time and being exposed to different social groups and events might actually make this a lot easier for you to do organically. You might already be in the flow of getting to know and exploring chemistry with a lot of different people, and I think that's awesome. But for those of you who are not particularly social, or if you are more introverted, or if you do spend more time solo, it's going to be something where, sure, theoretically, you could just sit around and meditate 8 hours a day, mapping out this partner that you're drawing to you, and ultimately take that route. But I know a lot of people aren't willing to put in the elbow grease when it comes to sitting and meditating for that amount of time. Because here's the deal. If you don't want to actually go take action and go explore it, then you have to pour energy into it some other way. So if that's not meditation, which is, some people do that, and I don't see anything wrong with that. But in the same breath, I do think that we can shift our perspective around what dating is. So I think there are too many people out there right now who consider dating to be a punishment, or like, I have to date all these people and it's so annoying. Whereas I personally like to consider dating, or at least this is how I was looking at it, as just exploring chemistry, just getting a feel for Who am I interested in ultimately? Who do I like? What am I into? What feels good to me? Ultimately, if you go into dating with more curiosity than anything else, more willingness to explore chemistry, it's not going to feel like a grueling process. I would just look at it as I'm feeling out. Like, you might have to try on a bunch of different pairs of shoes before you find the right fit. And that's what dating is. And I personally don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it can be a lot of fun because you can seek out different elements that you ultimately enjoy. You can kind of get a fuller picture of what you really like if you are exposed to more people. So let me touch on online dating for a moment. Now, keep in mind, this is not the 90s, and I think there is still some stigma against online dating for whatever reason. I can tell you and I'm extraordinarily biased because I've manifested a lot of soulmates through online dating. I consider online dating to be really efficient, which is something that I like. I like that online dating is a specific platform where you can go and you know that there's a large body of people who are all looking for similar things in the area of romance, relationship, however that looks for different people. But if you are someone who really struggles with a really expansive social life, or if you don't have a ton of friends, or if you don't have a really vibrant thriving social group, then I think online dating is a perfectly reasonable tool to use. Remember, online platforms are simply a gateway to real life. And I think that if you're able to get a concentrated group of people, and then on top of that, you are able to kind of create a skeleton and put yourself out there, show little bits and pieces of yourself through writing or quizzes or whatever forms they have online, it actually creates there's just a high concentration of people, and therefore the odds of you having success are much higher in many ways, just purely based on numbers if we're not looking at anything else. Now, I'm all for, meeting people organically and going out with people organically. I've had that too. It was way easier for me to go out with people and to go on dates when I was in college. But as I got out of college, that became more challenging for myself particularly. But I do not demonize online dating at all. Ultimately, energy is energy is energy. If you're manifesting a partner, if you're calling someone in, if you're interested in dating, who cares if they come from an online app or if they come from meeting in a coffee shop? My perspective is, if you're available to meet people, then you need to open as many doors as possible. So different doors are going to feel more or less comfortable for different people. I had absolutely no issue going on a dating app when I was super young, so it just worked for me. That just made sense for me. I had no shame about it. I had a bunch of friends that were online dating. It was no big deal. If online dating is not your thing, then it's one of those questions that you might have to ask, where are my people then? Because again, I don't care what you do or how you date. I don't think you have to do any particular thing. But my one thing that I would keep in mind if you are interested in finding love is just, how are you opening doors? If you're not opening doors in some way, whether it be going out with friends, online dating, picking up a new hobby, doing other social activities, taking yourself out and exposing yourself to connection, it's like God can be sending you stuff day and night, but until you open that door, it's not going to walk through. So you have to decide, if you're wanting love, if you're dating, well, what doors am I opening? And I think that that is going to be one of the most helpful perspectives you can take, just so that you can decide for yourself what feels right. If online dating doesn't feel right, don't do it. Or if specific apps don't feel right, don't do it. Personally, can't stand Tinder. I don't like it. It's not my thing. It feels like a booty call site. I don't like it. However, OkCupid and Match, I have had a lot of success with. So it's one of those things where I really do not think that if something feels good to you, if something feels right to you, whether it's conventional, online, not online, whatever, I think that you ultimately going with what feels right intuitively is going to serve you the best. Or maybe you're skeptical, but you're still willing to try different things. Even that is okay. I don't think there's anything wrong with trying and attempting different things, because it's kind of like, what do you have to lose? If you're really in a position where you're tired of being single, then that's where you really have to lean into your intuition and take action that you're being guided to take. My next piece of advice would just be, what story, or this is what you can ask yourself, what story am I telling myself about dating? What am I putting on repeat mentally when it comes to dating? What energy am I bringing into dating, which is going to be another thing that's worth considering, because if you are not thinking about the energy of going on the dating site, if you're not thinking about the energy that you're bringing into the environment, if you're not thinking about the energy that you're bringing, then that is what's going to skew your results. So if you're highly motivated, if you're excited, if you're curious, if you're ready to explore chemistry and you're really open to that and available to that, you are going to have an easier time when it comes to dating, just from an energetic standpoint. If you are in a life or death headspace where you're clinging on for dear life and you're suffocating your manifestations to death and you're pissed off and grouchy, I would resolve that energetically first. I would try to shift the way you're thinking about dating. I would try to transform the frustration however you can. I would try to lean into trust a little bit more. Ask, hey, can you help me see this a different way? Can you help me resolve some of my frustration? I'm saying that in a divine way, right? You can ask God, universe, divine source, hey, can you help me out with this? Because I'm having a hard time doing it on my own. And that can be really helpful for people as well. So however you want to do that, I would just pay attention to what energy are you bringing into dating. And if you don't know how else to think about it or perceive it, I would just fall back into, I'm curious about exploring chemistry. It doesn't need to be any more extreme than that. There doesn't need to be any more pressure on the situation than that. It can just be, I'm exploring chemistry and that's it. I really don't think it needs to be anything more serious, at least in the beginning. You are the one who sets the intention. You are the one who sets the tone. You are the one who gets really clear on what you want. And then you go try on all of the different pairs of shoes before you actually pick one to couple up with or invest more in, or, give to emotionally, or whatever the case may be. So anyway, the moral of the story here is dating gets to be what you want it to be. And I don't think that dating has to be a chore. I think that dating gets to be fun. I think it gets to be enjoyable if you allow it to. Again, this is a conscious choice. If you're already setting the intention for what you want and you're doing your healing, right? Because that's a core factor on what it is that you are going to magnetize in your life, then you really get to play with it and have fun and see who comes through. You kind of get to look at the future with excitement, like, oh my God, who do I get to meet? Who's coming next? So this is really exciting. I wonder who's going to make an appearance as I align myself with the right type of person, or the right energy of that person coming into your space. So anyway, I have so many awesome stories that are kind of wild and crazy, but I have a lot of stories now and a lot of experiences that I get to share with people, and I think that dating was a lot of fun, and I got a lot of good experience out of it. Some of the best times and the best people that I've ever met who are still in my life have come through dating. So I definitely do not demonize dating at all. And I highly recommend, if you are looking for love, do not demonize the dating process. It gets to be enjoyable. And if you're excited, if you can get into a state of excitement for you manifesting a high quality partner, it's going to make this a lot easier on you. So try to relax, chill out. It's not life or death, even though I know that relationships can often feel that way. But I promise you it's not. It gets to be a lot of fun. It gets to be enjoyable, and trust the process a little bit more with the exploration. Okay, I have a lot of questions today that you guys submitted, so let's go ahead and dive into the Q&A portion. Why do we feel drawn or pulled to one person? Is there more of a metaphysical explanation? So this could be a few things. It could be that there's karma involved, right? So that's more of the soulmate factor, which can make you gravitate towards one person. Sometimes it's biology. So for example, if you are in female form, or if you just run a lot of feminine energy and you are more comfortable in the nesting role, more of the gatherer role, if you will, then sometimes that can also make you gravitate towards one, and that's it. So you kind of have to be careful with that, because there's a few different things that are going on. Now, from my experience, what I found is that if I met someone who I had a lot of karma with, even if I'm dating like 20 other people I could be going on dates with, I'll still ultimately want to return to that karmic relationship because it's really, really familiar. So that has definitely been my experience. The other element of it, which is more of the biological, physiological, energetic piece that might be happening with the feminine dominant energy, if that's what's at play here, then that can also make you only want to focus on one person because that's what the feminine wants to do naturally. Now, I mean, I could talk about polyamorous relationships too, but really I'm just talking about, typically speaking, if we're just talking about the majority of people's experiences, I would say feminine energy is going to make you want to gravitate towards one, like the one, and just being able to build and nest with one person. Masculine wants that too, but it shows up in a different way. So I think that that's more of the energetic piece, and then also the karma piece, which is what can really mess things up. I'm just joking. It's not really messing things up, but it can feel very distracting and overwhelming if you're not careful. Are pheromones real? What's the deal with those? Okay, yes, pheromones are real for sure. Okay, so this is a very interesting thing. So I used to live with a French hypnotherapist who actually specialized in like helping women recover from divorce. And one of the experiences that she had was her husband had an affair. And one of the main things that flipped was that his smell no longer smelled normal, and it didn't smell good. It was actually revolting. Now, this is something that I hear from a lot of women, is pay attention to the smell. Like, and I'm not talking about you've been working in the yard all day and you smell like BO and you haven't put on deodorant. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like the pheromone smell. So yes, there's a lot that you can tell from smell. Whether this is also genetic. So smell is one of those things where you are going to be drawn to pheromones that help you expand the gene pool, not exist within it. So you're going to be more repelled by familial smells, and anything that would draw you toward incest, that is going to repel you on a pheromone level, whereas expanding outside of the gene pool is actually going to make you feel like you want to gravitate towards it because it is going to diversify the genes. So yes, pheromones are a big deal. Bodies are amazing. It's super cool. And I also find that there's also been studies about pheromones when it comes to attraction. So the more you like someone's smell, the more attracted you're going to be. Women's smell changes during their cycle. So I think your smell changes when you're ovulating. If you are in that ovulatory phase, you are going to smell different. Your face is going to look different. Your boobs are going to look different. There's a whole bunch of things that are different when you're in different stages of your cycle. So yeah, pheromones are awesome. I could geek out all day on that. It's super cool. Also, let me just be clear. Don't freak out, okay? If you're like, oh my God, my partner smells different. Okay, I'm just saying that pheromones are powerful and they can tell you a lot. And they also say, and this is back when I took a neuroscience class on sensation and perception, that your olfactory sense is actually the oldest sense that you have. So it's the most primal. It's what developed first, evolutionarily speaking, and it's big. That's why smell is so connected to memory. It's right up there with the hippocampus, and smell is just tied into so much. It's very, very primal. So do not underestimate smell. It is a big deal. A twin flame and I are reconnecting. What if my loved ones can't forgive them? I mean, this is really your choice at the end of the day. When it comes to like my family, for example, I don't trust my family with anything relationship related because I really don't think that they model healthy relationships. So a lot of my family members are extremely biased, and they also don't have the type and quality of relationship that I want myself. So I don't take any of their advice or listen to them or think that what they have to say is important about relationships. Now, if you are not in that same position, then it might be worth reflecting on if you do have a lot of loved ones who are healthy and have quality relationships that you actually admire yourself. You know, I don't think that there's anything wrong considering what your family has to say. But ultimately, that's up to you. You guys know, I don't actually put a lot of value in my family relationships. They just happen to share DNA with me. That's literally all it is. So that's more your call. If you feel like it's coming from a healthy, loving space, you know, think about it. Take it into consideration. But I also know when the karma is thick, when you're blinded by that element, a lot of people have to repeat the cycle or, you know, try the relationship out 40,000 times in order to feel complete with it. So I'm not one to judge or really tell you what to do. But ultimately, you're an adult. It's your choice what you want to do with your relationship and if it's right for you or if it's not and you decide to move away from it officially. I mean, it's just a matter of setting boundaries with your family if they're up in your business about it. That's what I would definitely recommend, is not sliding back into doing things to cater to them. Just set boundaries quickly and efficiently if you don't want to hear what they have to say, if they won't get off your back about, you know, being in a relationship with this person who is coming back into your life. That is all your job, to set boundaries around that if you don't want to hear it from them. And you can even let them know, I understand you don't understand or appreciate the relationship that I'm in, but this is the choice that I'm making. You don't have to like it, but it's what I'm choosing, so that's it. And they can do what they want with it. And then just make sure you have a clear, like, this is the line that I'm drawing in the sand. I don't want to hear your 2 cents about it. I don't want you to ask about it and then give me unsolicited advice. You know, you can set up all the parameters for that so you can feel confident in whatever choices you're making that are best for yourself. How to avoid being attracted to guys with similar characteristics as your dad. So here's the thing with this. I'm actually kind of a middle of the road person. there is one element where it's like, do your healing. The more healing you do, the farther away you're going to get from that old pattern that feels really familiar. So I can tell you for myself personally, even just in my experience of dating really early on, with the amount of healing that I had done just in that short amount of time, that like first 4, 5, 6 years, I was manifesting partners who were vastly different from my father, fortunately. And I actually just realized this somewhat recently when I had a therapy session with my dad. It went horribly, by the way, in case you're wondering. But at the end of this session, I even told my therapist, I was like, oh, thank God. Thank God I feel so much better about the work that I've done, because I know that I'm not dating men like him. I know that for a fact. Seeing what I saw today makes me feel so much better about my dating life, even when I was young. So it really is a matter of healing and putting in your time, putting in the work behind improving yourself and really working through those old wounds. It's going to get incrementally better. Now, the other thing that I would say is that the familiar patterns, any pattern in your family that is really potent and really thick, the main thing that you want to keep in mind is that a lot of people go back to those patterns, because if they go back into it and it does resolve, the potential for that healing to be really significant is powerful. So, for example, if you grew up with an alcoholic father and you really want your alcoholic father to get sober, that was your dream as a child, and then you get into a relationship with an alcoholic and they get sober, that would feel like a miracle, right? It's almost like that entire wound would resolve. Is that good for you? Is that a wise choice? Is that a good idea? Absolutely not, right? You don't want to go back into the wound just for potential healing, but that's why people go back into the patterns. It's because the potential for healing is very large and very vast. And so that's why I'm saying the more healing that you do independently, the farther away you're going to get from trying to make that happen, trying to force yourself into resolving that pattern, because you can do it solo. You can do it on your own. You don't actually need to act out the family drama and the family pattern that you've been introduced to in order to manifest a healthy partner. The other thing that I would look out for is big, glaring red flags. I'll give you an example from a personal experience. So this was a big fear of mine as well. I was really worried, like, oh my God, what if I'm unconsciously dating a bunch of people like my dad and I don't even see it, and blah, blah, blah. But one thing that was really helpful is just reminding myself what was familiar about that relationship, and is there anything coming up in this connection now that is familiar to the relationship with my dad. And you can apply this to either one of your parents. Some of you, it might be similar to the relationship with your mom. Some of you might find that it's more similar to the relationship with your dad. My mom was absent, so I never really experienced a relationship with her in the way that children are supposed to. So one big thing that I used to feel in the relationship and connection with my dad was an intense desire to manage him. I wanted to control him and be in charge of what he was doing. And I felt this way super young too, where I'm like, I just want you to do what I want you to do, because I'll feel better if you just stop drinking, if you just stop being belligerent, if you just stop going out with your friends, if you just, stop paying so much attention to this other woman, your flavor of the month, if you just, calm down with the chaos, if you would just stay home with me rather than going out and partying, then I'd feel better, okay? So that was the old pattern that I felt with my dad, okay? So when I got into dating, I really didn't experience it that much. Like I didn't ultimately get into any type of relationship or dating situation long term with anyone who did that or mimicked that pattern. But a few years ago, I remember it clear as day. I was sitting at dinner with this guy that I think it was like our second or third date, it was just the beginning. And I remember listening to him talk about work, and I had this overwhelming feeling of wanting to control him and wanting to manage him and thinking like every word that came out of his mouth, I wanted to change what he was doing. I thought he was completely approaching his office politics wrong. I had all of these judgments about like, you're weak, you're not handling it right. And I felt myself spiral into wanting to control him. And I was immediately like, oh shit, this is 100% familiar to me. This is the old pattern. This is mimicking, even though his personality is completely different from my dad's, it doesn't matter because the mechanics of the connection were the same. And I knew immediately, I was like, that needs to be the last date. I can't see him again, just because that was too potent and that's way too familiar for me. And I don't know that it would even be worth exploring, just because, ultimately the chemistry wasn't good enough for me to keep going. So I called it quits after that. But you can pay attention to patterns like that if you notice an overwhelming feeling that is kind of sick within yourself. Sometimes triggers will come up that are worth working through, and then other times it's just like a disrespectful, like I mentioned, I was immediately thinking, you're weak. I don't like the way you're handling this. That's a big issue that I'm not willing to work through, because that's not going to get any better. And what ultimately would have happened is I would have gotten into that relationship and ended up being the abuser. So I already caught it within myself where I want to bully him. I want to belittle him. I want to do all of these mean, cruel things, which is my own trauma, my own wounding. It was inflaming it way too much. So here's the thing. In dating, in relationships, you will not be able to avoid your own triggers. Okay, you're not going to be able to avoid it. It's practically impossible because many of us are acting out old patterns, old behaviors, old experiences that we had early in life. What I have found to be healing is finding people who respond to me differently than the way my parents did. That's one big thing that you can look for and that you can ask for, is someone who isn't going to perpetuate the patterns and respond to you the same way that your parents did. And the other thing is, you don't want the other person's way of being to just outright trigger the shit out of you, right? That's also not going to feel good. The way this guy and the office politics and the drama that he was experiencing made me disrespect him or want to disrespect him, okay? That's way too inflaming. That's not going to be a good mix. So you really need to pay attention to that. Understanding, yeah, you're going to get triggered. Triggering in itself is not bad. It's more about the context. It's more about the familiarity. It's more about whether or not it's perpetuating a pattern, or if it's something where when I'm in a connection with someone who is healthy and good for me, I know that I'm able to recognize where I am jumping to conclusions. I'm finding things within myself that are feeling really disrupted, but I'm able to manage it myself, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the other person. That's good. Then you found your sweet spot, right? I could talk about the nuances of this for a century, so I know that it's really complicated. It's not terribly easy because it is so nuanced, but I hope that makes sense. You don't want their existence to be extraordinarily inflaming and familiar, but you also want someone who's going to respond to you in a more evolved way. How do you know if the connection is worth exploring more or if you should let it go? For myself, I think that chemistry is the biggest factor for me. Chemistry is something that I personally don't think that you can develop. That's just been my experience, and I know a lot of people feel that way as well. You either have it or you don't. So anytime I find good or exceptional chemistry, I know that's worth pursuing and at least seeing what's underneath that, because the chemistry is that spark that you can maintain throughout a lifetime, right? So if that's not there, I personally don't think it's worth exploring anymore. That's just been my experience. That's something that I consider to be priority. Chemistry is always priority for me because I find that to be the factor that's a bit harder to come across. And when you find that in a way that's mutual, it's absolutely worth exploring, so long as the relationship is healthy and the person is healthy. So if you don't have at least somewhat of a healthy base, because it's like you can have really good chemistry with someone who's a drug addict, right? But that's probably not good for you to be in for many reasons. So it's really a matter of evaluating the health and chemistry. And I would say if you have both of those factors locked and loaded, then you should absolutely pursue it. Let me just mention one other thing here, because I do have a lot of clients who deal with this, so I figured I would share it here as well. The number one fear that I hear from people actually comes from the first good chemistry that you experience. A lot of the time, people experience good chemistry, and if it's the first time you've ever tasted that, it can be very, very frightening to let go of it because you're afraid you're never going to get it again. And I hear this over and over and over. So let me just say this one time. Good chemistry can be found in more than one place. I promise you, I guarantee it, there's 8 billion people on the planet. I promise that one person and one person alone is not the only good chemistry that exists. It's just that you need to be exposed to more people if that isn't the right person, just so you know. When you are low on self-love, does it affect the quality of other love that you attract into your life? Kind of, sort of. So if you have low self-love and you're not really in a self-love practice, if that's not something you're flexing and actively doing for yourself through healing, reparenting, any type of intimacy practices that you have going, there's a lot of ways to practice self-love. It's not about the quality of love that you attract. It has more to do with your threshold to receive good love. So the thing is, sure, it can come in the form of abuse or, outright disrespect and a lack of love. That can be a pattern that you recreate in your dating life, and that does happen for some people. But there are other times when you might have low self-love and you're not really amplifying that within yourself, and you're not holding that within yourself. You could theoretically manifest a kick-ass partner who has a lot of love to give, but your ability to receive it is where things are jacked up a little bit. There's a kink in what's going on. And because of that, it can create a situation where it's available, but you're not receiving it. So it can come up in both ways. It can be a good partner where you're just not able to receive them. I have experienced that myself. And then I've also had the experience of attracting someone who was at a lack of love, but that was more of a pattern of absence because I felt the partnership experience and developing that with my parents was absent to begin with. So I was perpetuating the pattern of there being a vacancy when it came to my love life. So if you find yourself in any type of cycle like that, the main thing that you want to consider is how much love am I willing to receive from myself? And then that is ultimately what's going to help you receive more of it from the people around you, from potential partners that come into your space. It's a threshold issue more than anything else. I'd like to know why there's so much ghosting going on. Now, this question kind of cracks me up because it's like, well, there was ghosting back in the 70s. It's called, you didn't call me back. Why didn't you call me back? That was ghosting back in the 60s and 70s. It's just that today in 2020, there's such a large quantity of people that we have exposure to. The communication is so intense in 2020, and there's so much communication that it's simply statistics. It's just numbers. I don't actually think it's as much of a cultural issue as it is just a numbers issue. Whereas before, maybe we're only dating one, maybe seeing two people because that's what you had exposure to. But today, like I mentioned, I was going on 5 dates a week with different people. I'm like going on planning multiple things, and so I have multiple conversations going on at the same time. This is back in the day when I was dating a lot, and for that reason, it's like, yeah, I experienced more ghosting as a result of that that process, but it's purely numbers. If I were back in the 70s and I had one guy who didn't call me back, it wasn't a phenomenon that we saw enough to give it a term. I think it's just about the context being different. It's not about people being as different as we think they were. It's just numbers. That's my assessment of it. I think we just have more opportunities to communicate and therefore more opportunities to ghost, and voila, you have ghosting. Okay, this is a good question. What is the difference between conflict resolution and trying to force something to work? So the first element that I would consider here is repair actually happening, or do you find yourself to be stuck in the same loop? Because those are two very different things. True conflict resolution results in just that, a resolution, an agreement that moving forward we are going to evolve even if we fuck up from time to time. It's okay for us to be human in this container called a relationship, but ultimately, if you find yourself being trapped in the same loop, the same cycle, the same process, and no growth is happening and no true resolution, no forward progress is being made because you're reverting back to the same pattern over and over and over again, that's force, that's stagnation. That's where relationships get really sour and resentments and cheating starts to kick in, or, whatever type of relationship traumas come up. It's from that repetitive loop and cycle that you're not breaking out of. So if you are in that with somebody, then it's something where you're going to have to evaluate, is this actually the right relationship for me? And I know that that's not what people want to hear, but that's the reality of it. If you're not able to grow and evolve from that container, it's going to make it really, really challenging for you to get through it in a way that is going to support both of you and help both of you expand. Evolution is really important. So if the relationship isn't evolving, I consider that to be a red flag, because you will have to adapt, right? So in order for resolution to truly happen and for you to feel good about being in the relationship, there have to be agreements that are made, there have to be commitments to the growth and evolution and just progress. Progress is what happens as a result of good conflict, healthy conflict. Force happens as a result of stagnation and not really being able to evolve within the container. I hope that makes sense. Sorry if it's a little esoteric. I try to be clear in these things, but it's not always easy. Okay, this next one is, I would love for you to touch on trauma bonds, entanglements, etc. So let me give you my spiritual shtick on this first. When we're talking about a trauma bond, that's equivalent to what you could call a root chakra relationship. You do not want a root chakra relationship, because what happens is when you plug into someone's root, it becomes survival based, and that is just not a good place to be, because your stability, your freedom, your autonomy, your life force, if all of that is wrapped up in someone else's root chakra, then your stability is going to be, it's kind of like it's going to make or break your well-being at all times. So you can think about trauma bonding as like codependency on steroids. There's a few ways that this happens, just from more of a practical level. So you have the trauma bond, at least this is how I view it. You have how I think most people consider trauma bonds is basically when a narcissist love bombs you in order to get people addicted to them. So I saw my dad do this with women time and time again. I'll tell you what he did. So he used to make women fall in love with him all the time by wining and dining them, taking them out for a whole bunch of fun. Like you could not imagine, like he would just take you out on the time of your life and surround you by all of these cool people in these cool places with all of this delicious food. And he would just indulge every single one of your senses. You would have the most amazing time of your life. And I would watch women do this with him all the time, and they would fall into the trap every time. And so after he does this, then he rips everything away once he knows that he had them hooked. And once it was, I guess, the love bombing portion of his relationship was over, what happened is the woman would, whoever he was dating at the time, would constantly try to pursue that original love bomb. So it's kind of like if you do heroin for the first time and it's like the best high of your life and you're constantly in a state of chasing that, that's what a trauma bond can essentially recreate in a relationship context. Trauma bonds come from, at least the way I see it, is a pursuit of an original feeling that was felt and almost willful ignorance at not looking at current circumstances and the current state of things in present time. Instead, it's all about, but I used to feel so good, or occasionally, you can also call it like breadcrumbing. Sometimes they'll breadcrumb, like they'll just give you just enough attention. They'll make you feel just special enough in order to keep you hooked, but never actually give you exactly what you need in the relationship. Love, support, security, affection. I mean, whatever it is that you're looking for. So love bombing is a big, big, big red flag and sign of a trauma bond. So I'm actually very skeptical, at least this is how I've been because of my dad. I actually don't like charming people. It turns me off quite a lot, and it comes across as phony and disingenuous a lot of the time. So I really don't like the whole charm, I'm gonna wine and dine the shit out of you. That stuff immediately comes up as a red flag. That's from my trauma though, right? So someone could be totally genuinely doing that, but I just know for myself, I'm very suspicious of people like that. So you might find that as well. If you're having a really good time with somebody, then just, I would practice being in the state of the observer. Just, oh, this is really interesting. Oh, he's investing a lot right in this moment. Let's see what happens next. Let's just be curious about this and see where things really go. And you will be able to see if that only lasts a few weeks, or if that only lasts for a certain amount of time and then it does a 180, you know that that person was love bombing you. It wasn't actually who they truly are. So you have to be careful with that. This is why I'm saying that, or I don't know if I've already said this or if I deleted what I just said, but timing matters a lot in trauma bonds. Timing is big. So let me start with the exception to what I'm about to say. If you have done a ton of healing, I see this more with older people in their 50s, 40s, who have had a lot of life experience, who have been through their fair share of relationships. That's more so the demographic that I see this with. If you've done a lot of your own healing, you know what you want, you're really clear on things, and you know where you're at, and you meet someone who's in the same place in their life and is ready to build with you, and things are just moving quickly as an organic result of the healing that you've both done, that can actually be healthy. That can actually be healthy speed that's experienced in a relationship. But for the majority of people, that's not what's happening, okay? When it comes to trauma bonding in particular, speed is one of the biggest red flags that I see with people who trauma bond. Let me qualify that statement. So, for example, this is one of the things that I consider to be the most common. So if you have someone who all of a sudden emotionally dumps onto you and talks about how much trauma they have and how fucked up their life has been, and that's what they're leading with, oh man, that's a big red flag. Oh my God. Like, that gets people into so much trouble. I cannot even tell you, because what happens if you have someone who is emotionally dumping, this is a strategy to see how much you'll tolerate from them, like how few boundaries you actually have. And they're doing this unconsciously a lot of the time. So from that standpoint, if they just lead with, I'm traumatized, I'm a wounded bird, it will also wake up the internal caretaker or the internal part of you that wants to go in and rescue, which is also what makes it particularly sticky and hard to break out of, because it's part of the addictive cycle of stress and trying to save each other and being stuck in the root chakra and not being able to break out of that, because so much of the person who is stepping into the role of the hero or the caretaker or the quote unquote good listener, they're actually in a position where they're giving their energy away. And so the vampiric person, like my dad, who is an energetic vacuum, that's what the test is energetically. So someone who is wanting to trauma bond with somebody might just unload all of their trauma on them early on and see how much will this person give to me as a result. Because people think it's the other way around. People think that if you're dumping trauma, you're the one who's giving energy. That's not the case. It's the other way. It's the person who's creating a container for that person to dump trauma into. That is actually what takes energy. That's why I get paid to hold space for people as they're processing their trauma, because it takes so much energy, and that's not something that you really want to do prematurely in a relationship without knowing whether or not you actually consider that person to be worthy of your energy in that capacity, in that density, right? This is the classic example of he's super wounded or she's super wounded and they have so many things that they're working through, but they have a good heart. Okay, that is like one of the biggest things that I see with trauma bonds in particular, is that people get addicted to obsessing over whether or not someone is going to heal, and really there's no plans to heal in this lifetime. It's all an illusion. It's all just, I need to sit and process with you. This is one of the biggest things that I would actually consider to be a trauma bond, because it is waking up the caretaker energy. And keep in mind, this is something that you can be doing with each other. Like, it can be both of you sharing trauma, both of you having a container and flip-flopping all of that energy in the root chakra, and it just makes a shit show, which is why it takes people years to get out of that stuff, because it is so addictive, and people are trapped in the illusion that they're helping each other, when in reality, a lot of the time they're re-traumatizing each other by inflaming that part of themselves. It's a trip, man. Relationships are wild. Entanglements, if I'm being completely honest, I don't know as much about that. I imagine that it's similar in the sense that if you're giving a bunch of energy to someone and then taking a bunch of energy from them, and there's too much overlap or engulfment in the relationship, like if you get bombarded and overwhelmed, if you get like swallowed whole by a relationship and start over identifying with the relationship itself rather than your own state of being, that's another form of what I mean, I guess I would call entanglements. But I see that as more, I would put that more in the category of engulfment. So it might just be my lack of understanding of what entanglements are. But I think that a lot of this stuff ends up looking very similar, if I'm being completely honest. And let's not forget good old attachment style. And of course, there is more than secure, anxious, and avoidant. There's also ambivalent attachment styles. So something like an ambivalent attachment style. And if you're wondering what that is, it's basically like all someone needs is a pulse, and the person will attach to them. And this happens a lot with kids who had either super, super, super unstable homes, or you see it with like foster kids. Sometimes there can be a high risk for ambivalent attachment because it's kind of like they'll attach to a lamppost because they just have to attach to anything and everything in order to survive. So that can also be something that looks like engulfment, and it looks like a trauma bond, and it technically kind of is, even though the core issue is the attachment style and an inability to be independent and on your own, fully autonomous, things like that. Okay, this next, it's not really a question, but it still cracks me up, so I'm going to bring it up. It says, also, I'm treading lightly here, but I totally thought you were gay. And I've actually, I even had a partner who said I have lesbian vibes. No, I am not gay. The only context in which I would engage sexually with a woman is in the context of a threesome, but generally speaking, that's not what I go for. I have absolutely tried dating women, but it actually ends up feeling like two magnets trying to be pushed together, and it just doesn't work because I am ultimately in feminine form, in feminine energy, and I run a lot of it. And so I want a super masculine polarity, and I really like the male form. And so, yeah, dating women has just never been for me. Just not my thing. But it's also my personality type really comes across as masculine. I like confrontation. I like conflict. I'm aggressive. I'm very intense when people meet me. And so it's kind of like the strength and power. And even because I'm an ENTJ, for those of you who are wondering, that personality type is not common in women at all. It's like one of the lowest. INTJ and ENTJ are dead last at what you find in women. And so it completely makes sense that people confuse that with my sexual preferences, even though that's really not the case. But yeah, no, I've heard that plenty of times before. It's really no big deal. Okay, how can you tell what's the difference between chemistry and infatuation? So, well, I mean, the thing is, there is a honeymoon period for relationships. So chemistry is something that I consider to not go away. So no matter how much you are around that person, that chemistry, that spark, that fire, that feeling of, I don't know, just yumminess and fireworks doesn't really go away. Like that can always ignite at any moment. It's always kind of felt there. So that's how I would describe chemistry. Infatuation, I think, can be similar, but I think infatuation has more to do with the honeymoon period. It has more to do with timing than anything else. So hopefully that makes sense. That's just what I think about it. I don't think infatuation is bad by any means. I think it just has to do with How long you've actually allowed things to cool down and what's still present. Chemistry will still be there, but the infatuation typically goes away over time. So I think that's the main difference. So you just have to give it enough time to see what happens after that infatuation, the Twitter-pated honeymoon phase, after you get over like thinking that the way they fold clothes is cute. After that, what comes after that? And that's where you can really see the chemistry come up if you don't feel it already. But chemistry is really hard to deny. In my experience, like I said earlier, I don't think that it grows over time. I think it's there immediately. You either have it or you don't. You feel it or you don't. And I have not found chemistry to develop over time. That's just me. I know there are probably some people who disagree. Okay, signs somebody actually is into you and not just projecting your feelings and seeing what isn't there. Okay. So I think I understand the question. It's how can you tell if there's legitimate interest there rather than you projecting onto them what you already think? And again, this is a matter of needing to slow down and go slow with somebody. And I think that there is too much emphasis on needing to move really fast, in my opinion. I don't think that everyone needs to move fast, and I really don't think that's necessarily good for that exact reason. Because if you are the type of person who has a habit of seeing what potential exists rather than what's actually there, you have to be extra conscientious and move extra slow so you can actually evaluate properly and learn to look at just the facts of what's going on rather than looking at the potential. Fuck potential. Potential is pointless. Potential does not matter at all. And I think that potential is trash. It's more about what are they showing to you now? What are their behaviors? What are their words that they're saying now? What are they doing for you now? And just being able to see the consistency in behavior as you're moving slowly. How are they actually showing up on a regular and consistent basis? And then you're able to see the full scope of who the person is. Now, I'm not saying that you need to wait 4 years before you get into a relationship, but what they have said is that it takes a full 4 years in order to see who someone actually is, in order for them to kind of put down the shield of who they want to be perceived as in the relationship and really relax into the truth of who they are. 4 years is typically standard. So I don't think that that's a bad thing to consider at all. I actually think it's quite wise to just look at it as even if you're really comfortable around somebody, even if you are really authentic, I've never had an issue being super authentic. There's also part of me that kind of wants to put on my best self, and that's how it can be really early on in a relationship. So just to be willing to go slow if you have a tendency to go fast and then start mapping out your life with somebody and making assumptions about how great they are, I would say just take inventory, just check in with the behaviors, with the things that are coming up moment by moment, and there's no reason to jump to any conclusions. Just take the actions and behaviors that you're seeing now as the evidence that you actually want to take into consideration. The things that I would toss out are any talk of trauma. So, for example, if someone is sharing with you all of the ways that their life was horrible, please avoid adding that into the mix of who you're evaluating that they are. Because I know, and I have a lot of women who do this in particular, who think that just because a man has gone through a lot means that for some reason that adds to how they are in partnership or the potential that they have, and this is false. So you have to be careful with over empathizing, over sympathizing with someone. Just because they've had a hard life doesn't mean that they're a good partner or that it's your job to fix them. And because this does come from an adaptation out of trauma, I would make sure that you just pay close attention to your body rather than your mind. That's my other tip, is like, what is your body saying? And really working through the triggers that are coming up in your body and letting that kind of indicate what's happening. Because a lot of the time your body will be able to tell something isn't right, even if your mind is telling you everything's fine. No, don't worry about it. You're overthinking it. I would actually go into the body in order to see what's really going on. Okay, this is one that I think a lot of you will relate to. How come the only people that ever are into me are the ones that I'm not attracted to? So this could be a couple things, but the glaring issue with this question that is likely perpetuating this experience is the fact that you have now identified with a story that sounds like this. Only guys that I'm not interested in are interested in me. So because that has become the story, God is going to say yes to you every time that story comes up, and that is what you will perpetuate the experience of. So I think this has more to do with what you're looking for, what you're seeking out in the story that you're telling yourself, and that amount of density is actually creating a reality as a result. Now, I don't think that is ultimately true for you. That's not ultimately true for anyone, really. It may have been a pattern that you've experienced previously, which it's okay. We all have patterns that we've experienced previously, but there's no reason for you to make a story about it, right? We're just in the habit of doing this because as humans, we want things to have meaning. And so there's part of you that wants that to have meaning. Like, why is this happening to me? But what I would do is rewrite that. So if you go into your head and you're thinking, only guys that I'm not interested in are interested in me, I would blow a rose on that. I know you know what I mean when I say that. Blow a rose on that story. And then what I would go into is, that has been my experience previously, but from now on, I'm ready to experience mutual healthy attraction in my dating life. So that's how I would re-script it for your mind to kind of calm it down. Just because that's what history tells you doesn't mean that's what the future has in store. So I would do my best to no longer identify with the old story of this is how it has been, or this is what my experience has been in dating. I would just focus on what do you actually want to have happen now, and putting more of your energy in the story of whatever you want to create. Do you want to have mutual attraction? Do you want to have, a lot of healthy chemistry and healthy connection? And find ways to tell that new story to yourself, even if you have to confront that old belief every single day. It's okay if the old story comes back up, just to make sure that you remind yourself, oh, this is just a thought, it's just an old story, it's not legitimately reality. I just need to get in the habit of telling myself something new so that I can actually see something new out in my environment. Make sense? Why is it so hard for a Virgo to find love? Your astrology has nothing to do with your love life, I promise. You can have the worst possible astrology for relationships, but still be able to navigate it, because astrology is just energy. It's not like you're doomed if you have certain placements. It's just energy that reflect what you're working with. It's not a reflection of what the reality of your dating life is. Is immediate attraction, like the love at first sight feeling, always a good sign? Nope, absolutely not. I would describe this more as karmic. So if you have a love at first sight experience, that's all fine and good. But if they're super unhealthy, or if they have personality issues, or if they're really toxic, then you're basically just being blinded by karma. You're not seeing the reality of who that person is in this lifetime, in this incarnation. And so no, it is not a good sign every single time. There may be one-off, occasional experiences where people will say that it ended in a happily ever after, but that's not a universal truth. So no, it's not good every time. How can the chemistry be off when everything else is so right? I actually think that this is the other way around for you. I think it's more of everything else is good, which means that you actually are manifesting good things and you're calling in exactly what you want on paper. It's just that chemistry is the missing piece that you're still looking for. So what I would say is, thank you, God, for showing me that I do have high quality connections coming into my space and I am actually getting what I want. And I'm also ready to experience great chemistry as well. That's also something that I'm ready for and that I want to see more of. And I would just complete the package deal that you're looking for. I think that's a good thing that you're dealing with. I don't think that's bad at all. I think it has more to do with your mindset around it. Or if you find yourself having disappointment about the fact that there is no chemistry or that the chemistry isn't right, that's okay, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, because what I'm seeing is that you've been able to manifest pretty much a perfect thing on paper, and you're just working on sprinkling in the chemistry as well. And I think that's awesome. You're in a really good position with all of that. You're not doing anything wrong if you're able to nail your manifestations like that. So just ask for more chemistry and see how that goes for you and how that works for you. Oh man, this went a lot longer than I was expecting. Oh, okay. I hope this has been helpful. I know we've kind of covered quite a lot of info in today's podcast. Thank you for joining me today. It's been a pleasure. It's been a lot of fun. I always enjoy hanging out with you and answering your questions and chatting it up. So that's all that I've got for now. Don't forget, if you need support, go to onyxhealing.com and I can get you all tuned up, energetically speaking, and I will talk to you all next time. Have a good one. Bye-bye.